How do you feel today? What decisions did you have to make today? Whether you made the small decision to brush your teeth this morning or not, or a big decision to apply to a certain university, those decisions were affected by how you felt when you woke up or how you felt when you went to visit that university, and by rumors you have heard about those universities. Adults make 35,000 decisions each day. Luckily, majority of these don't involve a choice between life and death. However, this is the predicament faced by many people every single day. To take a life or not to take a life? That is the question.
On June 17, 2016, Canada received Royal Assent for Medical Assistance in Dying, MAID, which is the act of an individual seeking and being granted medical aid to end their life. This includes physician-assisted suicide and voluntary euthanasia. Some argue that MAID can be abused because patients may only be inclined to end their lives when in extreme suffering, even though recovery is possible. Others favor this legislation because if the patient is suffering intolerably and it is their decision to end their life, then it should be done. The Supreme Court carefully examined how to satisfy those in favor of MAID and ensured no one is put unreasonably at risk by abusing those implemented stringencies. So why is there not one conclusion on whether MAID is ethical? The answer is simple: emotion. This then poses the complex, big question: to what extent does emotion influence human decision-making? We all know from experience that emotions influence human decision-making to a large extent, but what exactly is emotion, to be influenced, and what is considered a large extent?
Emotion is a way of knowing which is responsible for affecting how we sentimentalize and perceive situations when faced with a specific circumstance, leading to the way we intuitively present ourselves and act. In this circumstance, to be influenced is to base opinions and personal stances or biases on emotions by any means. An emotion is considered to influence decision-making to a large extent, where the most important factor that determines the final decision is emotion. This is comparable to the halo effect, where one positive characteristic of a person overpowers and masks the negative characteristics to make them seem better. By defining a large extent in this way, this means that despite other knowledge, emotion is a way of knowing that determines what action to do. 3 claims are made to explore to what extent emotion influences human decision-making.
Since all human decisions made are subjective, emotions must have taken a role in creating this subjectivity. Subjectivity and objectivity are often compared in that a subjective statement is informed solely by personal preferences, whereas an objective statement would be free from personal bias. The distinction between them is often necessary to consider in conflicts of philosophy, morality, science, and the list goes on. Knowing this, emotions are subjective internal experiences that are unique to each person. David Hume believed in this subjectivity, claiming that moral judgments or decisions come from our emotions, called emotivism. In this way, behavior or decision-making is simply an expression of emotion. Consider this. Is it logically possible for everyone to agree on what decisions should be made given the same set of conditions? Ask yourself, have you ever made a decision that you could say for certain everyone on the face of the earth and every last alien in the universe would also agree with? Not one single being would disagree with you? Yeah, we didn't really think so. That's exactly the point. It's impossible for everyone to agree with one decision because emotions get in the way. Everyone has different emotions that may be more or less dominant and that can change at any given time. So, each and every one of them will go through a series of thoughts in their minds that are different when coming to a conclusion. Let's examine the story of sensitive Sally, who is the daughter of Fred, who is currently undergoing irremediable and grievous pain. Sally has a very close and loving father-daughter relationship with Fred. She and her father have always joked and played with each other ever since she could remember. Thus, Sally would not encourage Fred to end his life with the help of a physician because she cannot bear to let him go after all these years of fun. Thoughts she may be telling herself are, the pain will be worth it because we can spend more time together. Or, the suffering will surely end soon. Evidently, Sally is affected by emotions instilled in her, and this will cause her to make the decision against MAID. Now, let's examine the story of Arnold, whose mother Christine is suffering from an incurable disease and experiencing a lot of pain from it. Arnold has previously undergone a very painful surgery to fix a punctured lung, and so he can understand the pain his mother is going through and empathize with her. He may then suggest to Christine the option of assistance in dying to relieve her from this pain. Thoughts he may have are, I understand that mom is going through a lot of pain and she needs relief from this. And it will be better for her to die now than to continue living in pain. These will cause Arnold to make the decision to suggest his mother to consent to maid. From this example, it can be seen that two different decisions can be made for the same circumstance. Because Sally had the emotion of happiness with regards to her father, and Arnold had the emotion of empathy for his mother, they both formulated different thoughts about maid, leading to two completely different decisions. On the other hand, it can be argued that this difference in decision-making, what we should call opposition, will always exist regardless of the existence of emotion because it is human nature. Human nature can be said to be any behavior which applies to all humans. Have you ever encountered a very annoying person who always seems to disagree with whatever you are saying or with whatever anyone else is believing? A person to whom any word which is iterated, they will straight up shoot down as being incorrect? Chances are that this person is in the room right now. Actually, chances are that it's you. Each and every one of you. Yep, that's right. Hard to believe? How about if I put it in this way? Everyone feels the need to be superior, and to do so, you need to show that you have an opinion on the matter. By showing that you disagree, you are essentially proving that you understand the situation, and by voicing your disagreement, you show that you are intellectually superior to everyone else. This was the notion expressed by author and columnist Dr. Michael Hurd. But this so-called human nature is simply just a manipulation of emotion to act in favor of certain views, and so this innate and a priori desire to prove one's own superiority is actually a function of emotion. It will be human nature for someone to disagree with another person more so if the emotion of distaste, annoyance, or jealousy arrive from hearing this person's thoughts. This differs from the smaller urge of someone to disagree with another person if at the time they're not feeling agitated enough to do so. This is equivalent to someone saying, I'm not in the mood for it right now. The person will certainly do it, but just not right at that moment because their emotions aren't aligned in such a way which drives them to do it at that instant. Since this is the case, we can make it seem that human nature is a driving force behind our decisions, but really it can be suppressed and altered by the state of the person's emotion at the time. Thus, subjectivity ultimately boils down to emotion.
We regret past decisions, indicating that emotions played a role at the time the decision was made. Let's take some time to digest this statement. Say you come home from school one day and you're totally drained of energy due to 3 back-to-back tests. You're also sad because you don't think you did so well. In order to pick yourself up from the dumps, you play video games for the whole night to get your mind off school. However, later that night, you regret this decision which was affected by your sad emotions at the time because you just wasted your night and now have no time to do the assignments and homework due tomorrow. As mentioned previously, emotions pertain to subjectivity, and in addition to them, humans are also influenced by memory, personal experience, and faith. Regretting decisions is indicative of emotions influencing human decision-making because if the correct judgment of a situation was made based solely on memory and faith, which are considered subjective but still don't change as much as emotion, then no one would regret their decision. It is because of our change in emotions from past to present that we regret some decisions made in the past. Thus, it is understandable that people who have been supportive in allowing a friend or family member proceed with maid may later feel regretful. In contrast, it is argued that our change in perspective of the situation is due to societal factors, not emotions. For instance, it could have been that your friends were peer pressuring you to play video games because you deserve it after that hard day at school. You would most likely go ahead and do so because your friends are nudging you on. However, once the night has been wasted away, you regret this decision because you have no time for schoolwork. In this side of the argument, peer pressure swayed judgment and reasoning. So, with that in mind, If we regret a decision, it doesn't necessarily mean emotions were the factor affecting the actions at the time, because it was the societal factor of peer pressure. Moreover, the factors that play a role in the time of the decision arguably includes a basis with less knowledge, meaning you were less informed. Therefore, regretting a decision doesn't definitely indicate that emotions played a role at the time the decision was made, when it was actually a lack of understanding instead that led to the unwise decision. However, this change in perspective due to societal factors is in fact influenced greatly by change in emotion. For instance, the example about peer pressure is that it wasn't your own emotions that led to the decision, but the desire to conform and fit in with others. However, what exactly makes peer pressure so effective? It's the negative emotion it evokes by the constant nagging in wanting to be accepted. Peer pressure is only deemed so when it causes us to question our own decisions and raises inner turmoil. Moreover, in order to gain knowledge and finally know more information to make better decisions that leads to our regret of past decisions, emotions are also coming into clarity or remolding themselves in a way which allows us to see the situation in a different light. This is closely related to MAID because there is a fear that a person could make the wrong decision and regret requesting medically assisted death. For this reason, the process for requesting it requires many precautions so that the service is conducted appropriately in a way that protects people from abuse or misuse. A patient is required to submit a written request with 2 witnesses, undergo medical assessments to ensure eligibility based on established criteria, and must wait a 10-day reflection period before receiving the service. Ongoing consent is crucial, so the government has made it exceptionally clear that a patient can withdraw their request at any time, in any manner. Because emotions change, there are many instances where the physician or nurse must confirm the patient's agreement to MAID up until the final moment before receiving it. If the decision to proceed with MAID is still irrefutable and unchanged, given the time that is undergone since the beginning of the process, then this means the possible regret that stems from an emotionally charged decision from the past has been minimized.
Emotions are impossible to suppress.
However, we have the common situation where we question whether to lead from our head or lead from our heart. Though we may want to say that we lead with our head, as this would make us seem like more rational and intelligent individuals, our heart is actually the main driver of our actions, and our head is the backseat driver. Emotions that are provoked in us provide information about our circumstances in a simple, quick way that does not involve a lot of cognition. So in other words, it comes naturally. They try to assist in informing us about whether a situation can be to our advantage and may change our approach to it. For example, you are preparing for a presentation and you begin to feel anxious. These emotions are informing you about the situation you are currently in and may be a trigger from an event of the past. The anxious response could be a reaction to the teacher you are going to be presenting to because of previous failed attempts to achieve a good mark. Though you may want to suppress your emotions, as anxiety may not be something you want as a contributor to how your decisions are made, it is actually very difficult to do this because emotions emerge subconsciously and there is no way to avoid them. Moreover, it is argued that emotions actually serve a purpose by informing you of your situation and of what to do. At times, the brain may be processing so much information that emotion acts as a substitute for the brain in making these decisions. Thus, when a red flag situation emerges, an alert in the form of feelings will direct your attention to certain aspects of the situation and lead you to act a certain way, making emotion a great contributor to the decisions you make. On the other hand, it can be argued that emotion can be domineered or suppressed by the other 7 ways of knowing: language, sense perception, reason, imagination, faith, intuition, and memory. And thus, compared to the other ways of knowing, emotions are arguably not a significant contributor to decision making. When deciding whether or not to apply to a certain university, for example, reason may be considered to be a greater contributor because there are many factors that need to be analyzed and compared before the decision is made. As well, the decision to apply to a certain university is not a decision that is made on the spot, suggesting that perhaps emotion does not play that big of a role. However, the idea that the other 7 ways of knowing domineer emotion is flawed because emotions are instinctive in human nature. This means they affect other ways of knowing unconsciously. It can influence, for example, our perception, language, and also our reasoning. Emotions can cause us to have biased perceptions and fallacious reasoning due to their instinctive nature. As well, language can be perceived differently according to the individual's emotions. When someone is happy, "What are you doing?" may seem like a question asked out of the care and curiosity of the other person, but when asked the same question when the individual is angry, it may be perceived as an annoying remark. Moreover, our memory is skewed because of our emotions. When recalling memories, according to how we may feel at the moment about certain situations or people, we will remember things differently. A girl thinking about his ex-boyfriend now may remember him to be a jerk because of the resentment she feels for him. However, at a different point in time, when the girl was happily with him, memories recalled would seem to be much more pleasant. These are just a few examples of how emotion can affect the other ways of knowing, showing that though the other ways of knowing does contribute to our decision making, they are actually influenced by emotions, making emotion an even greater contributor in making decisions. From the beginning of time, emotions have been embedded in our genetic makeup, so they are always there, influencing our decisions. Emotions create biochemical reactions throughout the human body, influencing it to change its physical state. However, these emotional genes are slightly different in every individual, which explains why even when people see and experience the same exact situation, they react differently. The connection to MAID is that people are faced with the same situation of suffering from an incurable and painful disease, yet each of them go through a different set of emotions, controlling the decision on whether to consent to their own death or not. This difference in outcomes is based on these different genes and show that emotions, such as the undeniable grief that can be observed, do indeed contribute to the decision of embarking on MAID.
How are these findings useful for other applications, and what are the implications? The great contribution of emotion on making decisions, as shown through this presentation, is not only relevant to life-changing decisions such as MAID, but is also relevant to our everyday lives as we make a continuous series of decisions. As explained by Alan Goldman's causal theory of knowledge, these decisions end up affecting other decisions either indirectly or directly. Evidently, human actions are subconsciously influenced by emotions and moods. Another real-life situation which relates to this is Richard Thaler's research in behavioral economics, which demonstrates that humans are affected by seemingly irrational emotions to act in ways that are not economically logical. Recognizing that emotions affect our decisions, we can use this knowledge to our advantage by becoming more self-aware and conscious when making important decisions to ensure they are rational.
To conclude, let's go back to the big question of to what extent does emotion influence human decision making? From this presentation, we found 3 things that can help us formulate a conclusion. For one, because human decisions are subjective, it can be argued that it is the different emotions in people that contribute to creating this subjectivity. As well, emotions must have played a role at the time decisions were made, because we regret them later if we feel differently about the situation. Finally, emotions are impossible to suppress because they are created subconsciously. From these 3 points, we can conclude that emotions do indeed play a big role in human decision making, and especially in life-changing decisions such as MAID.